Well, hello there. Welcome to Prog Chattery 777. We're talking about Genesis. We've made it to a big one. Duke. Fantastic, fantastic album. Where we left off last time, the band had lost Steve Hackett. They were reduced to a three-piece. They responded by making a kind of a hodgepodge album of some songs that wasn't necessarily coherent, but had some strong moments to it. And after that album, Phil Collins came over here to Canada, the other side of Canada, to Vancouver, to try and save his marriage. It didn't work out. The other two band members made solo albums. When Collins came back, the rest of his band was doing solo stuff, so he kind of hung out in his house and wrote his first solo album, which was to become Face Value. It was released after this album, but he recorded most of it before this album was put together, or at least he was working on it anyway. And that proved to be a very important thing because he became Collins became a better songwriter. He kind of became a songwriter. He wasn't really a songwriter before. He kind of contributed lyrics here and there, but now he was actually writing songs. And two, he became a better singer because he started, obviously he was very sad about the breakdown of his marriage. So he was emoting. He was getting his feelings out by way of singing these songs, and became a much stronger vocalist. He wasn't just hitting the notes anymore. On this album, he's really, he's really giving it. And, that's also the birth of, the typical Phil Collins solo sound, which has obviously been met with lots of criticism over the years. But, I mean, you gotta hand it to the guy. He's a really, really good singer. He is a fantastic singer. I think I prefer Peter Gabriel as a singer, but technically, I think Collins has got a better set of pipes on him. I mean, he's really, really, really good. But the problem is, he had so many hits that, became, not so popular in later years, and it became kind of a typical Collins sound, which, it's just a result of oversaturation, and that's too bad because, like I said, I think he's a good singer. He's a good songwriter too, technically, but I'm not the bigged fan of all of his songwriting, to be totally honest. I think he's a better drummer. That's my opinion. But anyway, they'd all done their solo thing, and they reconvened as Genesis once again to record this, and it's fantastic. It's brilliant. The big thing about Duke is that they actually wrote another 20-minute epic a la Supper's Ready. So, I mean, they're still in that progressive mindset for sure. And they realized that the big 20-minute thing, which they had written all together, the three of them as a band, was way stronger than the individual songs that each of the members contributed, separately. So they realized that would have been an unbalanced album, so they broke the epic into three significant sections, three bits, and then placed their individual songs in between those three bits. And I think that was a brilliant decision because it leads to a very coherent album. It's got a set structure to it. It's well put together. And I mean, even I think there's songs on, and then there were three that I like better than most of the songs on here. But this album wins far and away just strictly because of how it's structured. It's got you put it on and it's got a very definitive beginning, middle, and end. They've organized that journey, and it's great. And for that reason, it is a classic Genesis album. Definitely a classic. It's a great album cover too. It's a unique one in their catalog. It kind of looks like a children's storybook, but yeah, it's very cool. These fun little illustrations here, along with the lyrics. Really good. So, the album opens with the first three songs on the album are a part of the Duke Suite, the big epic, and they are Behind the Lines, Duchess, and Guide Vocal. They're all they seeg together quite seamlessly. So I mean, again, you get it, and Behind the Lines. I mean, the opening notes of the album are just so loaded with energy and freshness, and it's got the weird time signature and all that. So the progginess is intact, and the fact that these three songs seeg together. I mean, it's the strongest opening I think they've had probably since well, it's only 2 albums ago. They've had some good openings. 11th Earl Lamar is really, really good, but I don't know. It feels like classic 70s Genesis, although I believe we're in 1980 now. Behind the Lines is a really great little song. After the big long intro, it kind of goes into the song bit, which has got lots of nice parts. The song bit is kind of verse chorusy, but um, it's engaging, and again, Phil's voice really grabs you. And of course, the drumming is fantastic as always. Phil was still on top of his game as a drummer at this point. Then Behind the Lines kind of fades out, and Duchess fades in quite seamlessly. Duchess is actually the first time Genesis used a drum machine, so that's a significant thing. That became pretty big later on. And Duchess I think that's one of the highlights of the album. It's kind of like that story song kind of a thing. It's got a real quiet beginning, and it slowly fades in. The drum beat part the drum machine part that I mentioned it lasts for quite a long time, and it's a really nice little bit of atmosphere, which obviously a classic Genesis thing. And the song just quietly builds. It reaches its kind of big moment and then quietly fades back. And then we get guide vocal, which is just a quick verse, really. A bit of Tony Banks by himself with Collins doing the guide vocal bit. And yeah, it's just a stellar, like it's 10 or so minutes to open the album. It really, really high energy. And, right away you can tell that this is, as an album, better than what they did with Then There Were Three, even though Down and Out is a great opener. It's just, the album is so consistently good for the first, 10 minutes, like I said, and it's all linked together. Brilliant. Then we get the first of the individually written songs after that. And that's kind of like a breather, because you get all this information with the sweet bit. The breather is Man of Our Times, a Rutherford song. And I really like this one, actually. I never used to quite so much, but then I realized, it almost has kind of like a Back in New York City kind of stomp to it. And there's just some mad keyboard to it. It's burning bright. It's an excellent song. And some really cool drumming, like the really fast bass drum bits that Collins does in there is really cool. And it kind of shows where they were heading. It's not nearly as complicated or filled with instrumental madness as some of the other stuff they did, obviously, but again, it's a perfect song for this period where they're directly between crazy prog band and soon to be pop band. So it's kind of typical of the period, but really good. Then we get Misunderstanding. Now this is significant. This is the first time we hear a song exclusively written by Phil Collins. And obviously, it's a love song. It kind of relates to the divorce stuff I was talking about. And it's kind of got like a Beach Boys-y kind of thing, surf rock, bam, 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 ba-dam, dam. And the backing vocals are nice. It just doesn't feel very Genesis-y. It doesn't, there's something. It feels more like it should be, Collins solo than Genesis. But it became a hit. It was the biggest hit on the album. I should think. It's the one that I hear on the radio most, or I have heard on the radio most. And, it's okay. It's a pop song. It lacks the quirkiness of some of the other pop songs they did earlier. But, it is what it is. It's a hit, and it's fine. Then we get Heathaze, or Heathaze. I'm not really sure how to pronounce that one. This is one of Tony Banks' songs that he brought to the table. And it's okay. It's kind of a typical Banks song. It doesn't really have the really long extended instrumental section or anything, but it's the subdued piano kind of a thing. I think Many Too Many from the previous album is a bit better. But obviously Collins with his newly found voice kind of brings a different element to his songs, to the Tony Banks songs. It's okay. Then we flip the record over. We get side 2, track 1. Turn It On Again. Now this is the other big hit on the album. This is the other part. This is a part of the Big Duke suite. So this is the second part that they inserted, and it's about TV. But the thing that everyone talks about, obviously, is the fact that it's in a weird time signature. I'm trying to think of what it is now. Do 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 I just counted 13, but I don't know. It's really cool because Collins, the drums that he provides, he gives it that real punchy, fast tempo kind of stuff, and the band had, before had just been playing it. But Collins put this drum beat to it. You have no idea that it's in an odd time signature, but it is, and it's turns out to be a classic piece of Genesis. I love the chorus and the syncopated get so lonely when she's not there. Really, really classic stuff. And then a good live, it turned into this kind of Blues Brothers thing, which I'm not a big fan of, but the song itself is a classic. Then we move on to Alone Tonight. Possibly the weakest song on the album for me. This is a Rutherford song. And, it has some of those elements of the early Genesis stuff, like the little synth line. It kind of pops up in the second and third verses, I think. It could have been on Then There Were Three. It's a bit dreary. Alone Tonight. It's not my favorite. Possibly the weakest song on the album for me. We move on to Cul-de-Sac. Now, this is the other Banks song. I think this is probably the most underrated song on the album. This one harks back closer to, Trick of the Tail kind of stuff. Fancy arrangements. It's got the big intro. Banks is doing this really big orchestral kind of sound that he's trying to get out. Boom, boom, chicka-doo-doo, chicka-doo-doo. It's great stuff. It's super dynamic, and Collins delivers a great vocal performance, really great drum performance. He's doing I think he's doing like this 30-second notes on the hi-hat there, really fast hi-hat with a slow tempo. And it's a classic piece. Cul-de-Sac. Listen to it. It's good. Then we move on to Please Don't Ask. This is Phil Collins' second, the other song he put on the album. I'm very conflicted with this song, really. It feels more Genesis-y than Misunderstanding, I think. Musically, it kind of has the Tony Banks piano thing going. But I mean, the lyrics are kind of depressing, although they are good lyrics. And I think that's worth noting is when Collins started writing songs, he had a real knack for writing very relatable lyrics. I mean, he'd write about how he was feeling, regarding his, personal life and whatnot. And he was writing for his own therapy. So, I mean, what ended up coming out was a very honest, very, human lyrical style that a lot of people can identify with. I mean, the lyrics in Genesis before had been about, battles in Epping Forest and musical boxes and Victorian era stuff and ladies that live in tumble-down cottages in the woods. And then Collins, what he was writing about was very human. It was universal stuff, and I think that is why his solo record was so successful. Face Value was so successful, and I think that's a new thing that was brought to the table in Genesis, and it contributed to their success as well. Not that I'm not against those lyrics, but I'm not necessarily for those lyrics either, because I think, like I said, it's a bit. Please Don't Ask is a bit depressing. Although they're well-written lyrics, it's just like, oh. But after Please Don't Ask, we get Duke's Travels and Duke's End. Now, this is the last part of the Duke Suite. This is the big, instrumental section. So the tradition of big instrumental combined with, bringing the first song back at the end of the album. That tradition is in great form here. Even if it is just by virtue of the fact that they took the epic and split it across the album. But Duke's Travels, it is just fantastic. It's that fusion-y thing is in full swing, and I mean, even as a three-piece, obviously they did lots of overdubs to orchestrate it, but I mean, it really rocks. It might be my favorite of the big Genesis classic instrumentals. I love Duke's Travels. I think it's genius, and then when it gets to Duke's End, you get the reprise of guide vocal, but then of course the music is in full swing. It's super dramatic. It's super high energy. And like I said, that moment when the guide vocal verse comes back, again, it's an all-time Genesis classic moment, a classic moment in the whole thing of the whole, collection of their albums. It's a highlight of that. And you would swear it's, even though they were definitely moving towards the pop thing here, you listen to Duke's Travels, and they're a prog band at their absolute peak, it seems. To my ears anyway. Duke's Travels is on par with Cinema Show and with Unquiet Slumbers for the Sleepers. It's brilliant. And then, of course, Duke's End, we get the reprise of the Behind the Lines intro, which is really cool. There's also a King Crimson reference. They do the little, there's a little kind of reference to a part that was on In the Court of the Crimson King by King Crimson back in '69. And it has to be a reference to that. It absolutely has to be. I don't care. They did that on purpose. So yeah, it is a really good album, and I think this is actually, if you ever were to try and get somebody into Genesis, I think this is a really, really good starting point. Simply because it's got the perfect balance of the pop stuff that they got really famous for, as well as the crazy progressive stuff, which makes them a legendary band. Legendary. Like I said, it's right in the middle. All the stuff before this is totally in progland, and all the stuff after this is, it's still progressive. I even hesitate to call a lot of it pop music, because even though it is poppier, it's still adventurous, you know what I mean? But this is right smack dab in the middle, and it's accessible. It's got lots of great playing on it. The whole band is still musically in top form, and yeah, it's a classic album. It's a contender for being my favorite, but it's got nothing on Selling England. It doesn't have the same quirkiness or it's not Selling England. Selling England to me is it's the closest thing to perfection they got to, but this is very close as well. So yeah, there it is, Duke. Thank you very much for watching. Send me a like, send me a subscribe, and stay tuned for the next video, which is going to be Abacab. We'll see you then.